Most recruiting agencies evaluate BD tools the same way. They evaluate everything else. Monthly cost. Is $139 a month worth it? That's the question. And it is the wrong question. The right question is, what is one new client relationship actually worth over 12 months? Because when you do that math, not the tool cost, the client value, the conversation about whether any BD investment makes sense becomes very, very short. Today, I'm going to run the numbers, what Flynt costs across its plan tiers, what the stack it replaces was already costing you, what one placement fee is actually worth, what one retained client relationship generates over a year, what Flynt needs to produce at minimum to pay for itself, and why the break even is a fraction of a single placement. First, the cost. Let's be clear about it because most people aren't. Flynt's starter plan is $139 a month, one agent up to 30 leads per day, campaigns, unified inbox, CRM, and a dashboard. Everything you need to run a full BD function, one platform, one price. The pro plan is $267 a month, two agents up to 60 leads a day, deeper AI personalizations with up to 6 angles per lead, and priority support. Growth is $499 a month, 4 agents up to 120 leads a day, built for teams running multiple desks. For this breakdown, I'm going to use starter. $139 a month, annualized, that's about $1,668 for a full year of the platform. Hold that number. Before we get to the client's value, let's talk about what most recruiters were already spending on BD before Flynt even existed. The typical stack looks something like this. A contact database like Apollo, somewhere between $99 and $149 a month. A LinkedIn automation tool, $59 to $99 a month. An email sequencing platform, $47 to $89 a month. And on top of all of that, 2 to 3 hours of manual research every single day just to find the companies worth contacting in the first place. That's $200 to $340 a month in direct tool costs. And if you value your time at even $50 an hour, those 2 to 3 hours daily adds another $3,000 to $4,500 a month in time cost. So the real comparison isn't Flynt at $139 versus nothing. It's $139 versus a fragmented stack that was already costing you more in money and in hours every single month. That's before we've even mentioned a single client. Now, let's talk about what one new client relationship is actually worth. Recruiting fees vary by market, specialization, and arrangement. So I'm going to use realistic benchmarks that most agency recruiters will recognize, and you should adjust these for your own niche. On a contingency basis, where you're paid on successful placements, fees typically run between 15 and 25% of the candidate's first year salary. So if we take 20% as a working figure, a placement into a role paying $75,000 generates a fee of roughly $15,000. A $100,000 role generates $20,000. That's one placement, one successful hire. On a retained basis, where the client commits to you exclusively and pays in 3 stages, fees typically run between 25 and 33% of first year compensation. On a $90,000 role, that's somewhere between $22,500 and $30,000 in total fees, paid across engagement, shortlist, and placement. One retained assignment, potentially $25,000 or more from one client for one role. Now, here's where the math shifts. We've been talking about individual placements, but a client isn't a single placement. A client is a relationship, and relationships compound. Let's say you win a new client, a technology company in growth mode that needs to hire throughout the year. Conservatively, they give you 2 or 3 placements over 12 months. At $15,000 per placement on a contingency basis, 2 placements generate $30,000. 3 generates $45,000. On a retained basis, 2 assignments at $25,000 each is $50,000. 3 is $75,000. That's one client, one relationship, 12 months. The annual cost of Flynt Starter is $1,668. One new client relationship, conservatively on the low end of those numbers, is worth between 15 and 45 times the annual cost of the platform. Let that sit for just a second. 15 to 45 times annually from one client. So let's flip this around. What does Flynt actually need to produce to break even? At $139 a month, $1,668 a year, Flynt needs to contribute to a fraction of one placement in an entire year to cover its own cost. If your average contingency placement fee is $15,000 and Flynt's annual cost is $1,668, then Flynt needs to be part of that pipeline that produces 11% of one placement per year. 11%. That's not a placement. That's not even close to a placement. That's a small fraction of a single fee, and the platform has paid for itself. Put another way, if Flynt helps you have one qualified discovery call in the next 12 months, and that call turns into a client who gives you a single placement, Flynt has paid for itself 9 times over. And that's on starter. With up to 30 leads per day, roughly 900 new contacts every month, every single one of them, a company that posted a job in the last 24 hours, is actively on the market right now. Let's take it one level further. To the meeting maths, industry conversion rates from discovery calls to new clients typically sit somewhere between 5 and 15% depending on niche and market conditions and how well the outreach was qualified. It takes somewhere between 7 and 20 first meetings to close one new client. client. So let's ask the real question. How many qualified conversations does Flynt need to help you generate to eventually produce one client? If we use 10 meetings as a working average and Flynt is helping you get into conversations with companies that just posted a job and are actively hiring right now, these aren't cold prospects who have no contacts. These are companies that have publicly signaled a hiring need. The conversion math is already working in your favor before you've even said a word. You don't need Flynt to generate 100 meetings a month. You need it to contribute to one conversation that eventually leads to one client in a 12-month period. After that, you're in profit. Everything else is upside. So here is the uncomfortable truth about the price objection. When a recruiter says, hey, $139 a month is too expensive, they're not actually objecting to price. They're expressing uncertainty about whether they'll action the leads, whether the outreach will get replies, whether the conversations will convert, whether it will actually work for them specifically. Those are legitimate things to wonder about. They're worth thinking about, but they're not price concerns, because $139 a month when one contingent placement generates $15,000 and one retained client generates $50,000 or more over a year is not a price problem. The arithmetic doesn't allow $139 a month to be the barrier. The real question isn't whether you can afford Flynt, it's whether you'll work the pipeline it builds for you, whether you'll action the leads your agent services, and whether you'll run the campaigns, handle the replies, and have that conversation. If you will, the numbers are already overwhelmingly in your favor. If you won't, no tool in the world will fix that. And at least you've saved $139 a month. So here's the summary of the maths. Flynt Starter costs $139 a month, $1,668 a year. The tool Stack Replaces was already costing most recruiters $200 to $340 a month, plus hours of daily manual work. One contingency placement on a mid-market role typically generates between $15,000 to $20,000. One retained assignment generates $22,000 to $30,000. One new client relationship over 12 months conservatively generates $30,000 to $75,000. And Flynt needs to contribute to 11% of one placement in an entire year to break even on its own cost. The price objection, when you run the actual numbers, is not a price objection, it's a confidence question. If you're on the fence, if you're looking at $139 a month and wondering whether it's worth it, run this math against your own average fees and your own market. The answer will almost certainly be the same. There is a free 7-day trial in the description, no credit card required, up to 5 leads a day to start, and your first agent takes about 5 minutes to set up. And if you want to see what the complete Flynt workflow looks like from signal to first pitch, that walkthrough video is right here. So see you on the next one.